Hello there. This is Whiskey for Beginners. I'm Robert McKay. If you're not a beginner, that's fine. You're perfectly welcome here. But I started even before the channel with a little PDF document designed to help people who are new to whiskey to find in one place all the information I wanted in one place when I was starting and couldn't. And after a while I started the channel with the same goal. Somebody once said to me on MeWe, well, that's just a niche. Yeah, I know. It's a niche I think needs filling, although I'm not sure this channel is big enough to fill an egg carton. But I think it's something needs doing, and I'm perfectly happy to do it. I have a 37 video Whiskey Beginners playlist. If you haven't looked at that, I advise you to do so. Even, again, if you know whiskey already. Then I have a sippin' and talkin' playlist, which is just me sipping on something and talking about something. And then I have my whiskey reviews playlist, and that is what we have tonight, is a whiskey review. In order to review whiskey, we need whiskey, so I'm going to pour me some and then tell you something about it. Ouch. The cork pinched me as it went in. Oh no, I have an injury. Actually, I can see it. I might get me a little linear blood blister there. When I was growing up, being slightly hurt was just part of life. If you were playing, you would scrape your knees. If you were helping with the chores, you just might bash your finger with the hammer. I got me an itch on the inside of my nose. Always fun. But this is Devil's River Agave Bourbon. It is 80 proof, which is weaker than I like my whiskey. But I bought it on the strength of the 90 proof Devil's River Bourbon and a sample that I had previously had at Kelly Liquors, and that's where I got this on the 20th of April. Cost me $35.99, so 36 bucks. It's a thick bottle from back to front, and at 80 proof, look how dark that is. Would you believe that was 80 proof whiskey if you didn't know? I wouldn't. Now, let me just double check something. Yes, this is produced and bottled in San Antonio by the Devil's River Distillery. It is not distilled in San Antonio. It is produced in San Antonio. So wherever the whiskey's coming from, it is somewhere else. And then they are doing whatever they do to it, aging. In this case, infusing with agave nectar. It's standard bourbon, at least 51% corn, and I don't know the mash bill. I've not been able to find it. At least 51% corn, 1 or 2 or 3 other flavor grains. But they have infused it with agave nectar. And it gives something very different. I had to sample at Kelly's, as I've said, and then the first glass from this bottle, the overwhelming impression was sweet. A few days ago, I had a second glass. I haven't uploaded it yet, but I may not for months. It depends on how randomization works things. But I've made a video, a sipping and talking video with the second glass of this, And now here's the third glass, and I'm going to do an official review. Yeah, it's sweet. It isn't the bam, right in your face sweetness that it was on the first glass. It's even a little less than it was on the second. But it's very definitely sweet. It is not a traditional bourbon nose. Now, even at 80 proof, I am getting alcohol up in my nose, especially the right nostril, which isn't good for much else. And there is a bourbon nose under there. Not a very complex one, it doesn't seem. But I am getting bourbon. Sometimes even people with far more experience in whiskey than I have are going to find it hard, at least at first, to say anything other than it smells like whiskey, it smells like bourbon, it tastes like bourbon. And that's what I'm getting here. It smells like bourbon. Now, that's not a bad thing. Bourbon smells good. The sweetness breaks down into something floral. There's maybe a hint of a rye vegetal note in there, so it may be a high rye mash bill. There's an earthy note coming through too, so it may be may have wheat in there. So sometimes wheat seems to do that for me. But overall, it's sweetness with these other notes winding in and out underneath that. I said it's not a very complex nose, but it's more complex than that might lead you to think. It's just everything else is really subtle by now. There's kind of like a cream corn note coming in now. It is not on the nose dramatically different from any other 80 proof bourbon, better than some. The nose is considerably better than Jack Daniel's Old No. 7. It's considerably better than the 80 proof Jim Beam White Label. It has been a fair while since I had Buffalo Trace Bourbon or Eagle Rare Bourbon or E.H. Taylor Small Batch, and those last two I've only had the one bottle of, don't care to buy another. But my memory tells me that from a craft distillery that's not making its own juice, this stuff is better than any of those other three. That's my memory. If I had a blind here, I might not, or I might have a different view. This is definitely an attractive nose. The first thing I got on that sip was, bam, sugar. And my first sip, I always look for the mouthfeel, but that sugary sweetness come in, and it was all I could notice for a bit. But it does not have an 80 proof mouthfeel. It has a 90 proof or even better mouthfeel. And that may be the agave nectar that's infused off in there. But it's considerably smoother and creamier and richer on the mouthfeel than you would expect from a mere 80 proof. I don't know that I have ever gotten a mouthfeel like that from anything below 90. And it would not have surprised me to find this mouthfeel on a 100 proof bourbon. And the sweetness just lingers. I'm not at the finish yet, but it's almost like there's sugar crystals melting on the inside of my mouth. That earthiness that's in there, it's not very strong, it's not powerful, but it's making me think of Texas whiskeys like Arnwood Harbinger, which is a bourbon out of Denison, or Lone Elm Wheat Whiskey out of Forney. They both have that very strong earthy note. Almost, when I first opened all three of those bottles that I have, almost offensive, not quite. And it's toned down over time as the whiskey's opened up. Here it's there, but not more than noticeable. That's on the nose I'm talking about. I'm going to shift the camera just a tad. On the palate, the sweetness, it's not a cloying sweetness as I was afraid it might be, but it is a very definite sweetness, although reduced from the first glass to the second glass. Now the third, it's reduced again. But it's such a definite sweetness that it's hard to detect anything else. And there is something else there. As I continued to move the whiskey around in my mouth, I was able to tell that it does taste like bourbon. I do get cinnamon, I do get brown sugar, standard bourbon notes. The sweetness, as I focus on it, devolves into a couple of things, both giving me an impression of yellow fruit. One I would classify as pineapple, and the only whiskey that has ever given me a pineapple note is Lafroig 10. Here, it's not coming from the whiskey itself, I'm certain, but from the agave. And the other, if I had to say, I'd say mango, but I can't really be sure. But I get that double-barreled yellow fruit impression, along with the cinnamon and the brown sugar. Again, it's not giving me a huge amount of complexity, but it tastes really good. I'm not getting anything else on the palate. Not getting anything else on the nose, but what I'm getting, I like. It's not dramatically great, it's not spectacularly good, but it is good. You know, if you want something nice and sweet, well, I'm getting into the summary again. I'm getting into the summary, and I want to wait until it's time to do that, but this is good stuff, Maynard. Yeah, Mikey likes it. Let me check out the finish. I get that sugary sweetness. It almost felt like there were grains of sugar in the back of my mouth. I get that sugary sweetness. I got a surprising blast of red pepper. Not enormously strong, but that it was definite red pepper. Then I got some cinnamon and some brown sugar, and what lingers and is still there, although it is slowly fading, is that sugary sweetness. This is like drinking sugar almost. As for the summary, if you like a really sweet whiskey, you'll like this. Now, where you can find it, I don't know. I only know of one place in town here in Albuquerque that sells it. There might be more, but all I know of is the Kelly Liquors in the Mountain Run Shopping Center. But if you can find it and you want something that won't tax your abilities to dissect it, that isn't demanding, that is really sweet, a dessert whiskey even, you could do worse than buy this agave bourbon. How do I rate it on my 8-level scale with 1 at the bottom and 8 at the top? Well, it's not merely okay, but it's not quite at the level of fine, so I'm going to give it a 5, which is good, and it's a very high good. That is 3.15 stars. It is 62.5 or 62.5 out of 100, 6.25 out of 10. And I could almost give it that next higher rating. It just doesn't quite qualify. You know, up here's the 6 rating, and this stuff is just right down here, just barely, not quite that good. And who knows what I'll think on the next glass. It has opened up, the sweetness has reduced, the bourbon characteristics are showing through more, so by the time I get to the end, I may be willing to give it that higher rating, I don't know. Automatically swirl Coke, and you don't need to swirl Coke. So, Texas whiskey. We shall therefore, or I shall anyway, you may have already wandered off. You may be looking at this and saying, when is he going to shut up? In Frank Herbert's novel, Whipping Star, which is, in my view, even better than Dune, but nobody ever heard of it. Dune has took over. In his novel Whipping Star, there are, and I don't know how he pronounced it, I don't know how anybody else would pronounce it, but there are aliens called Tapriciotes who are communications devices, essentially. By some sort of mental link with a Tapriciote, you can call anyone, anywhere in the galaxy and have real-time communication. And when Alicino Furaneo goes to a Tapriciote to contact Busab, the Bureau of Sabotage, the Tapriciote tells him, close face. There are wildly different configurations of the various races' physical attributes. And a lot of them, I don't know about a lot of them, but some have a facial slit running up and down apparently. And the slit closes and the whole face is inside. So closed face. You may be looking at me and saying, closed face. All right, I will. Yeehaw.